Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Theo. I'm a quiet man that just prefer my own company. I'm an author, and my work demands long hours of solitude, which suits me just fine. Writing is where I find peace, where the world makes sense. Social gatherings? Not really my thing. The noise, the small talk, the pretending to be interested in conversations I don't care about, it drains me. So, I skip them whenever I can. But if there's one thing that used to matter to me more than my work, it was my marriage. Notice I said used to. My wife, Lucy, and I have been married for a while, but if I'm being honest, we stopped being a real couple long ago. We didn't fight, at least not often. But we also didn't talk. We just existed under the same roof. Somewhere along the way, the love we once had got lost in the space between us. My wife Lucy is different from me. Outgoing, ambitious, always in the middle of things. She works in a high-paced industry, and her consulting job always seemed to need her more than I did. Late nights at the office became her norm, endless meetings, and business trips that stretched longer than necessary. At first, I asked questions. Why so late? Can't you finish up earlier at the office? When will we get time together? But the answer was always the same. Eventually, I stopped asking. I got tired of hearing excuses, and I just accepted the truth. She didn't have time for me because she didn't want to make time for me. I buried myself in my own world, writing, reading, enjoying the solitude that my work required. It was easier that way. Then, one evening, she brought up the company party. She didn't just invite me. She insisted I come. Said it would be good for me. A chance to meet some of the best minds in her industry, a networking opportunity. I wasn't interested in shaking hands with corporate types or pretending to care about their business strategies. I wasn't looking to expand my connections. But something about the way she pushed it made me pause. She wasn't just suggesting it. She was practically demanding it. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like she was making an effort. Maybe this was her way of trying to fix things, to pull me into her world the way I had always asked her to. A part of me that still wanted to believe our marriage could be salvaged, latched onto that thought. So, after some back and forth, I gave in. I told her I'd go. I wasn't exactly thrilled about it, but if there was even the smallest chance that this could be a step toward fixing things between us, I was willing to endure a few hours of forced smiles and polite conversation. At the time, I had no idea that agreeing to that party would be the first step toward the end of everything. We arrived at the venue looking like the perfect couple. Lucy had gone all out, wearing an elegant, form-fitting dress that made heads turn the moment we stepped in. I had put in the effort too, slipping into a tailored suit, even though I couldn't have cared less about making an impression. The party itself was everything you'd expect from a high-profile corporate event, grand, sophisticated, and filled with well-dressed professionals. It was a kind of event where people talked about stocks, mergers, and business strategies between sips of overpriced wine. Lucy wasted no time introducing me to her colleagues, and their reactions were almost identical, followed by polite curiosity. So you're Theo. Wow, we've heard so much about you, but it's great to finally meet you in person. I'd nod, shake hands, exchange a few pleasantries. It was obvious that my presence was somewhat of a novelty. I was a mysterious husband they had only heard about in passing, the man who never showed up to company gatherings. Some of them tried to probe, asking about my work, my books, my thoughts on whatever topic they assumed I'd be interested in. Surprisingly, I found myself engaging more than I expected. This night might actually be worth something. The evening had been going surprisingly well. I won't say I was enjoying myself, but I had settled into the atmosphere. The conversations were tolerable, the drinks were decent, and for the first time in a long while, Lucy seemed to acknowledge my presence in her world. I wasn't naive enough to think this night would magically fix the cracks in our marriage, but for a moment I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was a step toward something better. Everything was going well. I could see Lucy glancing at me every now and then, possibly pleased that I was making an effort. Until the music changed. The lights dimmed slightly, and the dance floor started filling up with couples. I wasn't really paying attention, until I noticed a man approaching us. He didn't acknowledge me. He walked straight up to Lucy. "Shall we?" he asked, his voice smooth and self-assured, holding out his hand like he already knew the answer. For a split second, I waited for Lucy to shake her head, maybe laugh it off and stay where she was. I expected her to wave him away, to tell him she was here with her husband. But instead she smiled. She was about to accept. Instinct took over. I reached out, my hand firm on her wrist, holding her back before she could take a step. My voice was low, controlled. "You're not going anywhere." The man, Wilson, I would later learn, finally acknowledged my existence. He turned his head slightly, focusing on me. He didn't say anything at first. I held my ground. "If you want to dance with my wife, do things the right way. Or don't do them at all." That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Lucy turned to me, with an expression twisted in frustration and anger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped, jerking her arm away from my grip. "You're embarrassing me." I looked at her, shocked at what she just did. She turned back to Wilson, brushing past me like I was nothing more than an obstacle in her path. She was about to leave with him, right in front of me, with no shame, no hesitation. I felt something snap inside me. "If you move an inch, I will be forced to end this marriage." That was when Wilson finally reacted. He turned fully to face me, looking me dead in the eyes, and with a quiet, deliberate voice, he said, "You've always been a weakling, and you won't do anything." Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached for Lucy's hand, pulled her along, and just like that, she followed. I felt the weight of the humiliation pressing down on me, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I wouldn't be the fool who caused a scene at a party filled with her colleagues. Instead, I turned around and walked away, alone. When Lucy finally came home that night, I was still awake. I heard the front door open and the distinct sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I had already made up my mind about many things that night, yet sleep refused to come. A few minutes later, she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. I expected her to offer a weak excuse or at least a simple explanation for her actions at the party. Instead, she launched straight into an angry tirade. I let her speak without interruption. "You embarrassed me," she declared sharply, her eyes burning with resentment. "You made a scene for no reason, and then you just left. You abandoned me at my own work party." I stood there silently, absorbing every word. In her mind, she was the victim, and I was the one who had ruined everything. As I listened, it became unmistakably clear that Lucy no longer respected me, not as her husband and certainly not as a man. A marriage built without mutual respect is like a house constructed on unstable ground, doomed to fall apart. I knew that arguing with her at that moment would be pointless. She had already decided that she was right, and no amount of debate would change her mind. Instead, her harsh words only confirmed what I had long suspected. Lucy's actions and her refusal to take responsibility had sealed our fate. Yet, before I could fully address the issues in our relationship, there was another matter I needed to handle. Wilson. I was not the type of man who sought out conflict, but I also did not let serious boundary violations pass by unchallenged. Wilson had crossed a line when he approached Lucy so boldly at the party, clearly believing that I was too weak to do anything about it. His overconfidence was his first and most significant mistake. I resolved then that I would not allow anyone to disrespect me, and I would take the necessary steps to hold him accountable for his actions. The next morning, Lucy barely acknowledges my presence. No greetings, no small talk, just a cold, empty silence. She moves around the house as if I don't exist, slamming drawers a little harder than usual, sighing dramatically, making it clear she's still punishing me for the party. I don't react. I've already checked out of whatever twisted game she's playing. My mind is on something else. By midday, I make my move. I hire a private investigator. My instructions are simple. I want everything on Wilson. Every dirty little secret, every skeleton in his closet. Where he lives, who he talks to, where he spends his nights. If there's something to be found, I want it in my hands. The investigator doesn't ask questions. He just nods and gets to work. Days pass, and Lucy continues her silent treatment, but I don't care. I barely notice. I'm waiting for results which came weeks later. Wilson is married. 2 kids. A wife who, from the photos, seems blissfully unaware of the filth she's married to. But that's not all. Wilson has a reputation. There are records, complaints from women at his workplace about inappropriate advances. Some settled quietly, some dismissed. A pattern of behavior buried under paperwork and corporate indifference. But the real dagger? The evidence of his affairs. Photo after photo, video after video, all documenting his extracurricular activities and his long history of inappropriate behavior at work. Different women, different locations, and among them my wife, Lucy. The photos and videos had timestamps. He met these ladies in various locations, hotels, lounges, and even a few late-night meetings in secluded parking lots. Seeing that my wife had some sort of affair with him broke my heart, but I don't let it consume me. I suspected it, but now I have proof. Wilson doesn't know it yet, but he's finished. The first strike had to be personal. His wife deserved to know who she was married to. I put together a package. A USB flash drive loaded with images and videos of Wilson in places a married man had no business being. He was careless, and I had the receipts to prove it. Alongside it, I added a handwritten note. You deserve better. It was delivered straight to her doorstep. I hired a delivery man to drop it off. I gave it a few days, letting the fire spread inside their home, letting her process the betrayal. Maybe she confronted him or packed her bags and left. There's no way to know, but I really don't care. That was their battle to fight. But I wasn't finished. Wilson needed to lose more than just his marriage. His job was next. I started sending emails to his company's HR department. Anonymous reports detailing his history of workplace harassment, his pattern of sleeping with coworkers, and how he used his position to manipulate women into silence. One email wouldn't be enough. No company acts on just one complaint. So, I made it look bigger. I created multiple email accounts, each with a different variation of the evidence, each sounding like a concerned employee tired of the toxic environment Wilson created. The pressure worked. The company had no choice but to investigate. The whispers turned into official meetings. Wilson was being watched, questioned, scrutinized. It took a month, but the verdict finally came. He was fired. And Lucy? She didn't escape untouched either. The company suspended her and other women involved in the office relationship. Maybe they were still deciding what to do with them, or they were warning them to rethink her choices. Either way, the damage was done. On the day Wilson is fired, Lucy walked through the door looking drained. I already knew why. Wilson had been fired, and she has been suspended. My inside contacts had fed me every detail. The emails, the investigation, the final decision. She hadn't mentioned a word to me about it, but I could see it in her face. I stayed seated, watching her from across the room. Rough day? I asked, keeping my voice calm. She scoffed, giving me a tired glance. You have no idea. I leaned forward slightly. I might have an idea. Wilson's gone, isn't he? And you are suspended. She stiffened for just a second, then forced a laugh. Oh God, here we go again. She shook her head and walked toward the kitchen, pretending she hadn't just heard what I said. I didn't let her escape. How long were you sleeping with him, Lucy? That stopped her in her tracks. She turned around, laughing again, but this time there was a nervous edge to it. Are you seriously still on this? My God, Theo, you're obsessed. You've been insecure and bitter ever since the party. I just stared at her. She crossed her arms. All I did was dance with the man, and you turned it into this whole fantasy in your head. She gave me a pitiful look, like I was some paranoid fool making things up. You overreacted that night, and now look at you, acting like some detective in a bad crime show. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just pulled the folder from my drawer and dropped it on the table in front of her. Photos. Lucy's face drained of color. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Then came the switch. The tears. The shaking voice. Theo, why would you do this? Her eyes glistened as she stepped closer, her tone dripping with desperation. You ruined everything. My job, my life. Was that your goal? To destroy me. I let her rant. I let her blame me for exposing her, for digging up what she thought was safely hidden. "The divorce papers will be ready soon," I said flatly. "If you have a problem with that, take it to court." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, alone, drowning in the wreckage of her own choices. Now that everything is said and done, I want to leave you with lessons from my experience. Some of you might agree with me, and some might not, but these are the truths I took away from this situation. First, disrespect is the first step to betrayal. The moment Lucy followed Wilson onto that dance floor, our marriage was already over. It wasn't about the dance. It was about what that moment represented. A wife who respects her husband wouldn't hesitate to shut another man down, especially not in front of her husband. The fact that she even considered it, let alone followed through, told me everything I needed to know. Second, people show you who they are, believe them. Lucy had been acting distant long before that night. The late nights, the excuses, the way she always seemed to be too busy for us, those weren't coincidences. They were signs. Signs I ignored because I wanted to believe things could still work. But the truth is, when someone shows you time and time again that you're not a priority, it's because you're not. I should have accepted it sooner, but at least when the truth finally hit, I didn't run from it. Third, revenge is best served cold. That night at the party, I felt humiliated. I felt powerless. Wilson looked me in the eyes and called me a weakling. And for a second, I believed him. But emotions make people sloppy, and I wasn't about to let my anger push me into something reckless. I waited. I gathered information. I made sure every move I made would have weight. And in the end, patience turned that single moment of humiliation into total destruction. Wilson lost his job. His marriage is probably hanging by a thread. And Lucy? Well, she got exactly what she deserved. And finally, any time spent setting things right is never wasted. Some people might say, I wasted too much energy on this, that I should have just walked away. Maybe they're right. But when you are openly disrespected, when someone makes it clear they have no regard for you, reclaiming your power isn't just necessary, it's the only choice. I refuse to be the man who let himself be walked over, and I don't regret a single second of it. Now, I'll leave it to you. What do you think? Was I right to act as I did, or should I have handled it differently? Let me know. Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Patrick. When my wife's friends told her to leave the house for a week just to teach me a lesson, I did the last thing she ever expected me to do. I had seen the way her friends influenced her for a while, and I had warned her about the kind of advice they gave and how it never seemed to bring anything good into our marriage. But she didn't listen. So when they convinced her to pack a bag and leave our home just to punish me, I didn't react the way they all thought I would. I just did the one thing she didn't see coming. When I think back to how it all started, the beginning was peaceful. Maria and I had been married for 7 years, but our story really began long before that. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot, and for most of that time, we were in a long-distance relationship. We'd visit each other when we could, call every night, and text throughout the day. Honestly, we rarely fought. That distance didn't really test us like people say it usually does. In fact, it made the anticipation of being together more exciting. We thought that if we could survive the distance, we could survive anything. But what we didn't realize back then was that love, as strong as it might be, doesn't prepare you for the daily realities of living with another person. After the wedding, everything changed subtly. We moved in together for the first time. Suddenly, we were sharing the same bed, the same bathroom, the same kitchen every day. I had lived alone for years before we got married. I was used to my own rhythm, my own space, and suddenly I had to consider someone else in every little thing. It wasn't bad, it just took time. Adjusting to having someone always around, always involved in your personal routines, takes a mental shift. Still, I welcomed and loved her. I believed she loved me, too. That mutual affection and connection were our foundation. She made the effort to move to my city after the wedding so we could start our life together here. That move meant starting over for her in many ways. We spent evenings looking for job openings together. I'd send her links, she'd apply, and after a few weeks, she landed a role at a bank as a customer service representative. She was excited about it. She settled into her new role quickly, and like anyone would, she started making friends with people at work. I wanted her to build her own community here, have her own life beyond just being my wife. That was the atmosphere in our marriage back then, supportive, loving, and full of hope. When we got married, we both agreed that rushing into parenthood wasn't necessary. It wasn't a difficult conversation at the time, because we were both ambitious and wanted to build solid careers before bringing kids into the picture. We told ourselves, let's give a few years, save some money, grow in our respective fields, and enjoy the freedom while we have it. And for a while, it actually worked. Maria thrived in her job. Within a few years, she got promoted to head the entire customer care unit at her bank branch. To celebrate, I made dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant. We ordered a full-course meal. At some point between the main course and dessert, I brought up something. I think we're in a good place now. Maybe it's time we started thinking about having a child. I said. She smiled. Then she changed the subject, saying we should just enjoy the night and focus on her promotion. I didn't argue. It was her moment, and I didn't want to dampen it. But what I thought was a one-time deflection quickly turned into a pattern. Every time I brought up the topic afterward, whether casually, during a weekend walk, or while planning for the next year, she'd either avoid the conversation or shut it down altogether. Her words were always the same. Now's not the time. At first, I chalked it up to stress or work overload. But as months passed and her tone grew sharper whenever the subject came up, I started to feel uneasy. This wasn't just postponement anymore. This felt like resistance. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the first real crack in the foundation of our marriage. One Tuesday, I had wrapped up work earlier than usual. I didn't tell Maria I was coming home early. But the moment I walked through that front door, I had no idea I had stepped into something I wasn't meant to witness. My wife was sitting in the living room with her friends. I didn't recognize one of them, but the other had visited once or twice before. They seemed to be having a good time. I said a polite hello, and they acknowledged me. I figured I'd let them enjoy their moment, so I went straight to the bedroom. I wasn't looking to eavesdrop, but walls in this house aren't thick, and they weren't whispering. At first, I tried to tune it out. But one of them was bragging about how she finally blocked her second ex-husband. She kept repeating how marriage was a scam and how she felt free now. The other one casually said she was still seeing a man who, by her own admission, was very much married. She laughed as she said his wife knew but couldn't do anything about it, then called the situation a sign from the universe that she was meant to have him. I sat and listened in disbelief. I couldn't believe these were the women my wife was choosing to spend her time with. The conversations were filled with bitterness, entitlement, and a strange kind of pride in tearing relationships apart. It wasn't girl talk. It wasn't venting. It was poison, and they were serving it like a joke. When they finally left a couple of hours later, I waited a bit before bringing it up. I approached Maria calmly and told her that I was uncomfortable with the kind of things I overheard. I explained that I didn't think people who brag about failed marriages or dating married men were the kind of voices anyone should be taking relationship advice from. Instead of listening, she snapped. Immediately, told me I was spying, that I lacked boundaries, and that I had no right to judge her friends. I was stunned. The conversation shut down fast. She refused to hear anything I had to say and doubled down, acting like I had no right to question the company she kept. That was the moment I knew these friends were already influencing her, and she couldn't see it. After that confrontation about her friends, I watched my wife slowly turn into someone I didn't recognize. Every time she came back from spending time with those friends, it felt like she brought pieces of their bitterness into our home. She'd sit quietly at first, almost waiting for something to go wrong. Then, out of nowhere, she'd accuse me of anything and everything. At one point, she claimed I wasn't leading like a real man should. These were things she never said before, never even hinted at. It was like someone had handed her a checklist of things to be angry about. I tried not to overreact. But then one night, she came home late, and when she walked through the door, I smelled alcohol, like she'd been out drinking heavily. That wasn't like her. She wasn't the type to go out partying, especially not on a weekday. And I suspected exactly what it would likely come from those same friends who laughed about reckless living like it was something to be proud of. I gently asked her about it, saying, "Hey, are you okay? This isn't like you." But instead of talking to me, she exploded. Said I was trying to cage her, that I was threatened by her freedom, that I wanted to keep her small. She said, and I'll never forget this, she said I was trying to ruin her body by pushing for a child, that I wanted to trap her in motherhood while I stayed free. I didn't know how to respond as I stood there, completely stunned. Then she turned and walked away. After that night, things got even colder between us. We lived in the same house, but it was like we were strangers. She'd leave for work without a word, come home and head straight to the bedroom. When I tried to start a conversation, she'd give me one-word answers or flat out ignore me. It was like my presence irritated her. I gave her space. I hoped maybe it was just a phase, something she'd snap out of. But days passed, then a week, and the silence became normal. The warmth that once made our home feel like home was gone. All that remained was tension and the growing sense that I was being slowly pushed out of my own marriage. One morning, the sun hadn't even fully come up yet, and I walked out into the hallway to use the toilet and saw her by the closet, zipping up a small travel bag. There was no planned visit, no conversation about needing to be somewhere. So I asked, "Where are you going?" At first, she didn't even look at me, just kept folding a few shirts and placing them neatly in the bag. When she finally spoke, she said she was going to stay with one of her friends for a while. I asked why. She said our marriage wasn't working the way it should, and she thought we needed some time apart. According to her, this was the best way for us to both figure out what's next. I stood there, confused and trying to wrap my head around what was happening. We hadn't been talking much over the past week, that part's true. Things had felt off, but I never thought it would lead to this. So I tried to reason with her. I told her that every relationship hits rough patches and that we didn't need to separate to work things out. I even offered therapy, something we'd never tried. I was willing to sit down with a professional and have the hard conversations if it meant saving what we built. But she didn't even flinch. She just shook her head and said we needed a break. Just 1 week apart, according to her. I didn't know what else to say. I felt helpless. It's one thing when you argue and slam doors. It's another when the person you love quietly checks out and packs a bag like it's no big deal. She walked out without even looking back. As soon as the door closed behind her, I felt this tightness in my chest. I couldn't pretend everything was fine and just go to work like it was any other day. So I called in sick, told them I wasn't feeling well. Thankfully, my boss gave me a couple of days off. And for most of that day, I just sat, replaying every moment, every argument, and every red flag I chose to ignore. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about space or needing time to reflect. It was a pattern. I might still love her, but I couldn't ignore what she was showing me. If she was willing to leave this easily, if she couldn't fight for us even when I was ready to do everything possible to make things work, then there was nothing left to save. I didn't want it to come to this. But after everything that had happened, I opened my laptop and started searching for a divorce lawyer near me. Divorce was never a word I imagined would be part of my story. I thought we'd be one of those couples who fought through it, figured things out, maybe even grew old side by side. But there's a point where love stops being enough, when disrespect, distance, and manipulation replace it. I found a lawyer with good reviews. I booked an appointment for the next morning. I barely slept that night. At the meeting, the lawyer didn't sugarcoat anything. He walked me through the entire process, property division, timelines, legal notices, and the emotional toll that usually comes with it. I gave the go-ahead, told him to file the papers. On the 5th day of her being gone, she got the papers. Within hours, she messaged me, said I was bluffing, said this was my way of manipulating her to come back. I just stared at the message for a while. Then I typed out my reply. I'm not bluffing. The marriage is over. I didn't need to argue or explain myself anymore. I had spent years trying to hold that relationship together. That evening, I got back from work, tired and drained. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when I saw her. She was standing in the living room. The moment our eyes met, she rushed toward me, almost like she was relieved to see I still came home. Her voice was shaky, nervous. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with the divorce," she said. I didn't say anything right away. She continued, her tone a mix of panic and guilt, asking me to withdraw the papers, saying we could still fix this if I just gave it time. But something in me had already shut down. I just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You walking out of this house was the last straw for me. This marriage is done." And I walked past her. She didn't follow at first. But later that night, while I was sitting in the backyard trying to collect my thoughts, she came and sat beside me. This time, she wasn't defensive. Then, in a soft voice, she said it was her friend's idea. They told her to leave for a week, that if she disappeared, I'd come crawling and stop asking about having a baby. I just looked at her and laughed. It was so ridiculous and sad that she actually listened. "Well," I told her, "now you're free. Go be with your friends. Maybe they'll help you get through the divorce, too." She broke down, trying to grab my hand, saying she didn't want to be like them. She didn't want to end up divorced, bitter, and alone. That this wasn't how she thought things would go. But I had made up my mind. I told her straight, if you're willing to hurt your husband to impress people who couldn't hold their own marriages together, then you don't deserve to have one either. She kept begging, even as the days passed. But I didn't move. I didn't look back. If she could leave that easily once, she'd do it again. The divorce process wasn't quick, but by the time the papers were signed and everything was finalized, I had already moved on. Her begging didn't stop. She sent messages, called at odd hours, and even showed up unannounced a few times. She wanted me to undo what I had already accepted, that this marriage couldn't be saved. But I stood firm, not because I hated her, but because I finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean tolerating repeated disrespect, especially when they don't see anything wrong with it. Eventually, the court made it official. The marriage was dissolved. Everything we shared was divided. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm happy about how things ended. This isn't how I pictured my marriage story turning out. No one gets married thinking, one day this person will walk out because her friends told her to. It hurt, but sometimes feeling relief feels better than sadness. I don't have to worry about coming home to silence, to passive-aggressive remarks, or to a woman who lets others think for her. I don't have to wake up wondering which version of her I'll get that day, the warm partner I fell in love with, or the stranger her friends trained her to become. If you're listening to this and you've gone through something similar, or you're in the middle of it now, let me say this. You're not crazy. You're not asking for too much. A relationship should be between two people, not three, not four, not a panel of so-called friends who cheer for your relationship to fail just because they failed at theirs. A spouse who lets outsiders poison their home doesn't deserve the trust and loyalty that comes with marriage. And when someone chooses a toxic company over commitment, believe them and protect your peace. Thank you for watching.